Good morning, everyone. It's great to be with all of you today, and thanks for joining us. Welcome to Pattern for Progress monthly housing webinar series. Our monthly webinar series has been graciously and generously offered and sponsored by NeighborWorks America. This month's webinar is the second in a series of 3 sessions specifically dedicated to sustainable development and demand for low carbon buildings. Pattern is pleased to partner with our longtime supporter, Community Preservation Corporation, on this virtual series. This 3-part webinar series offers best practices and solutions on how sustainable development can be achieved, specifically through the lens of multifamily property development and other community revitalization efforts associated with local residents and businesses. Today's topic is saving energy and reducing the carbon footprint through downtown revitalization. We'll be back for the 3rd session on September 23rd to discuss the financing of high performance. We have a very busy morning, so I want to quickly frame the conversation. The broader community development industry sector, which includes the revitalization of our downtowns, through new construction and adaptive reuse for both housing and commercial spaces, is a strong leader in reducing the carbon footprint. As I had indicated last month, oftentimes affordable housing developers pave the way for others to follow in terms of new design and implementation of energy-saving building techniques and materials. Thanks to community-based organizations and community-minded developers, the Hudson Valley has a host of incredible award-winning developments. We're going to hear all about them this morning. The state of New York also has been a leader in the reduction of our carbon footprint and has prioritized the redevelopment of our urban centers as a key element to achieve the goals found within the New York State Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So, as we enter this new paradigm of community revitalization, high-performance construction is the new baseline, and achieving net zero is paramount. The traditional financial resources for housing and other revitalization programs from New York State now come with requirements for reducing energy costs. Again, saving energy and reducing the carbon footprint is a necessity and must be viewed as the new paradigm in revitalization. This includes the redevelopment of public housing authorities, Main Street revitalization programs themselves, housing rehabilitation, and new construction of housing and mixed-use developments. It is here, it works, and it is all about our future. This morning, you'll be hearing from professionals in community development and housing, speaking about downtown revitalization as a key element to the success of our urban centers. Our panelists will be describing how they have successfully reached new levels of energy conservation in their projects. They will talk about local challenges and the impact they are having within the community that go well beyond energy savings. Before introducing our moderator, who will in turn introduce the panelists, a bit of housekeeping. Please use Q&A box to post questions, and we'll do our best to fit them in at the end of the panel discussion. Let's get started. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's panel. A big good morning to Lori Borowiak. Lori is a senior project manager on the new construction program team for the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, otherwise known as NYSERDA. Laura has worked out of the NYSERDA's Buffalo region office since 2008. She is currently managing several projects seeking new net zero energy and carbon neutral performance for single family homes and multifamily buildings, to farms, a winery, manufacturing facilities, and campuses. She has her Master's of Urban Planning degree from the University of Buffalo and a bachelor's degree in Political Science and Economics from SUNY Fredonia. Good morning, welcome, and thank you for joining us today, Lori. You have the calm.
Thank you, Joe. So as Joe just described, our panel will answer 4 questions about their projects. And at the end, we will have time to answer your questions. So please enter your questions into the chat box, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. So we're going to first tell you what the questions are, and then we will have I will introduce each panelist to answer those questions. The first question is to describe your project. What is your project, or what is your program in Paul's case? And then they will answer, what are the local challenges with this project or with developments? Was there a learning curve with the local building department? And then finally, what was the impact of the project on the neighborhood? So I'm going to introduce Paul Beyer. Paul Beyer is the State Director of Smart Growth Planning at New York State Department of State. In this position, Paul promotes the principles of smart growth, sustainable development, livable communities, and collaborative governance on the state, regional, and local levels. Paul's experience in land use and smart growth began when he worked in the New York State Legislature, where he focused on land use, environmental, and public health policy. Paul served on the planning board in the town of Amherst, New York for 5 years, where he helped develop the town's comprehensive plan. He also served on the board of directors of Partners for a Livable Western New York, the premier smart growth advocacy group in Western New York region. Paul has a law degree from the University at Buffalo. Thank you for joining me today, Paul.
Thanks, Lori. Great to be here. Good morning, everyone. As Lori said, I am the Smart Growth Director, so my work is grounded not just in the principles of smart growth, but the history of a movement that began in the 90s for several reasons. So I'm going to set a vague picture here of the value of downtown revitalization, our signature program in the state, the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, and its benefit, emerging and accelerating benefit to the goals of reducing climate change and moving closer to carbon reduction and carbon neutrality. I'm going to very quickly take a mental flight, if you don't mind, through the smart growth movement to see how we got to the point where downtown redevelopment and smart growth are central components of the state's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, and is critical to meeting our ambitious goals in that act. I got into the movement on a planning board out in Western New York, a town outside of Western New York, Amherst, very bedroom community, sprawling rapidly. And that was in 1995, and that was the exact year that the phrase smart growth was coined. And at the time, we were witnessing extreme investment in sprawl, public policies, capital infrastructure, state and local spending devoted to sprawling outward. And really the core of the smart growth movement was to try to reverse that trend and focus policy and incentives and just people's mindsets inward towards our town centers and our village and city centers. They were, of course, disinvested. They were decaying in many ways. They had great urban bones, but we had neglected them. So that was the beginning of the smart growth movement. And I have to admit that it took a while for us to start touting the climate benefits of downtown revitalization. I'll get to those in a moment. At the time, we were focusing largely on the economic and fiscal arguments, and they were good ones. It ends up that downtown revitalization is good for jobs. It's good for attracting business. It's good for fiscal stability in managing investments on the local level. We were, of course, arguing the health and environmental benefits. We were watching sprawl fragment habitats and interrupt natural water movements. And we were promoting affordable mixed income housing in town centers and in the suburbs rather than some of the traditional areas where poverty is concentrated. But as the movement progressed, we realized that downtown revitalization is good for the climate. Even the IPCC took a while. I think it was their third report before they focused in on what they call human settlement patterns and their impact on greenhouse gas emissions. But in the state of New York, it's probably been about the past 10 years that we've really recognized the carbon benefits of investing in our downtowns and not investing as much in sprawl. And the signature program in New York State to fund and encourage downtown revitalization is the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. I'll refer to that as the DRI. It's an annual, since 2016, this is an annual allotment in the budget of $100 million. It's a competitive program where each region, each regional economic development council chooses one downtown and awards them $10 million. $300,000 for planning to choose projects and strategically plan their downtown, and $9.7 million to invest in projects. There are currently 40 DRI awards throughout the state, and we just announced a couple of weeks ago another allotment of $200 million this year, and we'll be able to choose 20 new downtowns to receive this award and to revitalize. And as we've developed the program, we have been mindful of the climate benefits of investing in downtowns. They are multifold. They reduce auto dependence, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions in the transportation sector. They allow for and enable the critical mass for certain types of renewable energy investments. And the buildings themselves, many of the buildings that we develop in downtowns are either existing buildings that are redeveloped or they're infill between existing buildings. So let me explain how this affects the climate in a positive way. First, I mentioned reducing auto dependence, which reduces what we call VMT, vehicle miles traveled. If you build in a compact mixed-use way, you're creating what's known as location efficiencies. One of the most basic ones is if you're more dense, your daily destinations, our land uses, our buildings, are closer to one another, so you don't have to drive as much. By mixing uses together, mixing different destinations together in one place, i.e. a downtown, you also reduce the number of car trips necessary to get to your different destinations. In other words, you can park in one place and access many destinations. That reduces vehicle miles traveled. Excuse me. And we also provide mobility options through transportation alternatives, such as walking, biking, and transit. Probably the most energy efficient form of development is transit-oriented development, and we are focusing in on that in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act as a major component of our smart growth recommendations. TOD is dense, compact smart growth built within a half mile of a rail or bus rapid transit station. You can imagine the benefits there. They're walkable. As I described, you don't have to use your car as much, but you can also commute and get to other destinations through transit, which in many cases even reduces the number of cars in a household. So that is the gold standard, or should I say in LEED green building terms, the platinum standard of downtown revitalization, building around transit. And that's how downtown redevelopment reduces transportation-based greenhouse gas emissions. As I mentioned earlier, also with downtowns, there are a multitude of programs and projects that are redeveloping existing buildings. And that's the greenest possible form of development, because you don't have to invest and use energy and carbon to build new. You have the structure already. There are a number of programs that promote that, including the Downtown Revitalization Initiative. The Historic Preservation Tax Credit in the state is probably the most successful and generous one in the country. And it helps developers to redevelop existing buildings. And some of our panelists here, if not all of them, have experience using the DRI program and the Historic Preservation Tax Credit. So if you invest in an existing building, you are inherently green. And I must say, another impressive part of the smart growth movement is that the historic preservation movement has joined hands with the green building movement to make it easier to get green buildings certified for an existing building, particularly an existing historic building. The third benefit is that a concentration of land uses and activity in one place, i.e. downtowns, helps us to invest in renewables. It enables renewables. Why? Because it provides the critical mass necessary, the locations for renewables, but also the customer base and usage. For example, microgrids is a program at NYSERDA called New York Prize that is proliferating microgrids, small energy plants really in your community, most of which use partial or complete renewable energy. You need a critical mass for that. They won't survive in a sprawling community, but they will survive fiscally and in the provision of energy for downtowns. Solar on buildings, solar on carports and parking lots, particularly around train stations, is proliferating in New York State. It's a great opportunity outside of your large solar farms to invest in solar energy. And electric vehicle charging stations. Of course, you need them on throughways and highways, but really perhaps their greatest usage will be found in concentrated areas where you have people commuting and they can charge during the day and evening. So that critical mass of buildings and people gives us the opportunity to invest more and to help programs like NYSERDA's Carbon Neutral for Economic Development initiative. Now, of course, it's important to invest in carbon neutral buildings anywhere, sprawl, rural, suburban, urban areas. But sprawl is extremely climate unfriendly. It's not that we shouldn't build green buildings there, but in some ways you're defeating your purpose. You're you're investing in an area, a land use pattern that is not climate friendly. So to me, as the smart growth director, it just makes more sense to prioritize our investments in areas that are already green and sustainable, inherently, in some cases, as I mentioned, in downtowns. So with that in mind, several of the agencies have collaborated during the Climate Leadership Act to reinforce one another in our programs. For example, the Department of State entered into an agreement with NYPA, the New York Power Authority, to prioritize investments of electric vehicle charging stations in downtowns. You just have to ask if you're a DRI community and you'll get NYPA's attention and investment. And already 8 communities have taken advantage of that, 8 DRI communities. Speaking of carbon neutrality, the Department of State has worked out an agreement with NYSERDA in their solicitation for the Carbon Neutral for Economic Development program, whereby DRI communities will, again, get priority treatment. Rationale, of course, being that it's a smart investment all around when your goal is carbon neutrality. So it should come as no surprise as we move on to the next set of panelists that these speakers are going to talk about green carbon neutral projects, but they're all in downtowns and most of them are in DRI communities. Basilica Hudson in Hudson is a DRI. Energy Square in Midtown Kingston. Kingston is a DRI community. And Peekskill, Rome, Oneonta, Lockport, one of our developer on the panel here, Ken Kearney, will speak about the many programs, the many green, carbon neutral, and equitable projects that he's investing in throughout the state, throughout many DRI communities. These are essential investments. I'm pleased that we're working together among the different agencies to build out our downtowns, but also to move our buildings closer and closer to carbon neutrality. I'm pleased to be on this panel because everything that I've just talked about means nothing unless there are people out in the field actually doing these projects. So with that, I will stop and let them talk about their fabulous work in downtowns throughout the state.
Thank you, Paul. That is a great way to set the stage for the next speakers that we have that we have coming on. So thank you for that. Now I'm going to introduce David Szlasa, a friend of mine. David is a producer and designer working across disciplines in performance, public art, and social practice. Szlasa's work is rooted in a commitment to social and ecological sustainability and ranges from scenic design to video art and the construction of a tiny solar-powered art studio. David?
That's an old bio, but that's great. Thanks, Lori. So yeah, I think it does speak to, I'm David. I'm a designer we're going to be talking about Basilica Hudson in this session. And but my background, I came up as a scenic and projections designer for live events, and spent many years on the road touring, developing a tremendous carbon footprint, both of my own and of the material scenic projects that I was making, and then chucking in a dumpster when the artists were done, and began to understand the impact of that industry, and made a pivot slowly but surely into helping venues that present and produce live performance to develop their spaces more mindfully and thoughtfully in terms of sustainability, and both how the buildings function from a mechanical level inside, but also how they invite people to be in those spaces and behave from an artist side or from an audience side. So many of the projects I'm working with now, Basilica included, are public art and event spaces. We are redesigning the Basilica Hudson, which is in the city of Hudson, about 90 miles straight north of New York City on the Hudson River. We are a small city of about 6,000, and the Hudson is a recipient of the Downtown Revitalization, which Paul just introduced to us. So we are a DRI project. The Basilica Hudson itself is a 6-acre campus with 2 buildings on it. About 20,000 square foot of buildings altogether. This is the largest one. Double screening for you guys' pleasure. But the big building is over 10,000 square foot. It's a big cavernous brick and window and steel structure with really no interruptions, or very few interruptions on the inside, where we do music concerts and events and craft fairs and weddings and a variety of things that need that kind of large enclosure. The building, when the current owners who I work with acquired the building, it was unconditioned and not up to code. And they did some minor or some kind of needed improvements to put some bathrooms in and get the building working seasonally. But now we're in a major redevelopment that is going to bring the buildings and campus to net zero performance with help from NYSERDA. It's also, as Paul was saying, this is a historic building. So SHPO and New York State Parks and Rec and the Parks Department are part of the process on this. So everything we do to the building needs to be up to historic standards. And the main thrust of the project is repointing and reinsulating the envelope, new roof, all new windows, putting an HVAC system in, new hot water, removing our commercial kitchen, which is based around combustion and propane, to all electric to achieve net zero. And then a large re-landscaping effort as well around the property. So we're about 300 yards from the Amtrak station. Another good point that Paul brought up is we're walking distance to Amtrak, and that train in just a couple of stops takes you right into Manhattan. So we're on the Metro, I don't know, whatever the line is, it goes to Albany, and we get a lot of people up on the train, for the weekend or for the day, and our space is very walkable. To frame up some of the questions that are part of this, so there are challenges with this project, as with any project. Some of them are local and some are broader than that. But I think one part of it is, funding this project and participating in this project are numerous agencies who have their own interests, and meeting the needs of those agencies is a complicated, but both financially and kind of spiritually rewarding process, right? So we're threading historic preservation against net zero, and folks who are helping fund those different things all have different desires on this project. And so that's tricky. And then tying it into the larger downtown revitalization of Hudson. So there are numerous projects. DRI comes into a city, and the city to a certain extent administers or oversees these projects, but then they have a life of their own. So our project has its own trajectory in life, and there are numerous others in and around Hudson doing their thing. And so part of the challenge also is stitching together our efforts with other efforts that are part of the DRI and other development efforts that are going on outside the DRI in the city, so that we can stitch our sidewalks together that don't match up right now. You come off our property and you end up in this like kind of urban blight train track area, and then you get into an Amtrak parking lot, and then you get up into the beautiful Warren Street, like commercial district of Hudson. And so we're trying to make sure those things get put together, and there are several different landowners and people who are involved in trying to make a 200 feet of sidewalk happen, so people can safely get down to our site. So certain things like that, and I think baked into that is either an actual lack of continuity or perceived lack of continuity in government, both in local and now state government. To say, okay, are these programs, are these things that are investing in us and that are potentially going to invest in the future of us, going to look and feel this way in a few years? And so, and are those same incentives going to be available? And there's always some concern around the stability of those things. And I'll really let my other panelists, who are much longer in this game than I am, with bigger portfolios, kind of talk maybe about some of that stuff too, is how do you look the long game and feel confident in a project that spans many years, but not knowing if where you started is where you're going to finish in terms of some of these programs. What else to say about this? And then some of the other challenges obviously are across the building industry right now, and we don't have to spend too much time on that, but material availability is obviously super hard. But when you're trying to put in huge windows to historic standards, we don't have a lot of vendor options, and the ones that are, I have a 32-week lead time on putting windows in this building right now, just from a manufacturer, and it's really, that's a challenge. But it's just part of what the game is at this point in time. And I guess lastly to say, so what's the impact of this? We're in design. We're almost we will begin construction imminently this fall. We are, I should say, as part of the project, we're installing also 150 kW solar in addition to the existing 50 kW solar that's on site. This will be a freestanding car park over the parking area that we have now, along with at least a dozen car charging stations. So there's a number of different ways we need to permit and look at this. We're in the interconnect process right now with National Grid. And so far, the impact of this project is really about, well, I'll say on a personal level, I work with other nonprofits and arts agencies who are getting to learn the story of this building and of the Basilica and how it's coming together with public support and public dollars. And other organizations similar to Basilica are taking interest and saying, oh, okay, we may be able to pull something off like this too. We aspire toward these type of improvements to our campuses, to our properties. I almost exclusively work with nonprofits, and they tend not to have lots of human resources or obviously cash resources. And so there's a skepticism like, can we do this? Can we pull this off? And so I've become one of the things that I do as a side hustle for my friends is advocate for these programs to other organizations and agencies who may be able to benefit from some of the incentives that are out there right now. So I think that's the biggest impact, is that I can help. At this point, the impact is I'm trying to help other projects get into this sort of net zero pipeline, or these like significant energy improvement efforts on their existing buildings. And like Paul I'm almost entirely working with existing buildings right now, although perhaps that will change soon. But that's the look of it. And then in the long term, I'll just also, the other side of the impact is we see in the neighborhood of 40,000 unique visitors to the property on a non-pandemic year. And part of this program in the building is to create a very visible representation of what net zero is and how it operates. We'll have lots of ways to kind of visualize the data collection from our solar and showing how that operates the building and kind of achieves a zero sum status. So we hope that the building itself will be a tool for education, and we're also involved in some hopeful workforce development and training when the building actually gets into construction, to try and get some kids up on ladders and making the stuff work for the improvement of the green building infrastructure here in our capital region. That's it.
Thank you, David.
Okay.
I love this project for many reasons, but mostly because of the way that the old and the new is intertwined, and that you're future-proofing this historic building for the next 100 years, so that it's still around. So thank you for talking about that project for us. I'm now going to introduce Ken Kearney. Ken Kearney is the founder and president of Kearney Group. Throughout his nearly 20 years of real estate development, Mr. Kearney has grown Kearney Group from a boutique real estate development firm into a regional leader in the affordable and mixed income housing industry. Known by his friends and associates as a businessman with a big heart, Mr. Kearney brings experience, tenacity, a strong work ethic, and solid professional relationships to any project he undertakes. Mr. Kearney is deeply connected to the communities in which he works. He is an active member of the board of directors for Patterns for Progress and Hudson Valley Community Foundations, and a member of the Putnam Hospital Center Board of Trustees. Ken, thank you for joining me here today. Are you ready to talk about your 4 questions?
Anybody who knows me knows I'm always ready to talk. Thank you for that introduction, Lori. Thank you. I'm Ken Kearney. My son, our youngest son, Sean, is my partner. He came into business about 10, 11 years ago, and we switched gears. I started this business 30 some odd years ago in the city of Beacon with a couple of vacant buildings in an area that lacked serious investment. We've all heard about the success of Beacon, and I watched how Beacon's Main Street grew over 15 or 20 years, and remembered some of those lessons, what attracted us there, what missteps there were, and what ultimately led to the overall success of Beacon. So the model that we're currently working on, we did our first one in 2015. We go into urban centers, smaller urban centers, Peekskill, Poughkeepsie, Beacon. We went back to Beacon, and we find a location in a community that is been disconnected, if you will, from other parts of the community, where there's been a lack of investment, as Paul alluded to in his introduction. And we try to locate a site that, if we brought a synergy to that site, would that site then connect this part of the community to another part of the community? Maybe increase foot traffic, thereby eliminating maybe perceptions or stigmas that have been, generated over a period of years as that urban center has declined, or that segment of the urban center has declined. So our first project was in Peekskill. It was a vacant site between two buildings. The project had started probably 12 years earlier. They got the footings in the ground, and then they did not move forward. A very, very challenging site, a very small site. And we approached the city and said, you have an artist district here that was formed back in the 80s, but it's got a little sleepy over the years. I come down to the artist studio, the open studio weekends every June, and I noticed every year it was tailing off. So we felt that if we could create a synergy in this part of Main Street, and we were located very close to City Hall over here and a couple of restaurants over here, but people were not walking by this vacant lot. There was a stigma or a perception issue. So we came up with an idea to use the state's new middle income program, along with some apartments targeting artists, affordable artists. And in addition, as fate would have it, we found out that the site had more contamination than we originally anticipated. And so we were able to get it in the New York State Brownfield program. That site and that project is called Lost on Main. We did a very similar project to it up in Poughkeepsie, Queen City Loft. Queen City Loft was an old urban renewal site that was sitting vacant. They had a couple sculptures on it. Next door was an old taxi stand, which was contaminated. And we combined the two sites, entered them into the New York State Brownfield program, and followed the same model as Peekskill. We did 70 apartments with middle income and artist loss. But what we did in Poughkeepsie, this was a strategic piece of property that linked the waterfront with Market Street, which is where all the county offices are. And again, there was a lack of pedestrian traffic. And we built some very ambitious retail spaces. We built a 7,500 square foot space. We actually built two spaces, 3,200 square feet each or 3,500 square feet each, to attract two restaurants. We were able to attract one restaurateur who opened up a brewery. We built an elevator at the end of his bar, which takes you up to a rooftop terrace with some of the best views in the Hudson Valley. And that presence of that brewery, that restaurant, coupled with an upscale fitness center and a meadery, it brought foot traffic. It brought a lot of energy and synergy back to this neighborhood that was lacking. And now you'll go there during the day and you see people going for their walks at lunchtime, and they'll come down from Market Street all the way down, where before I think they may have been hesitant to do that. So we're doing another one in Poughkeepsie right now, Crano Square, which is a underutilized parking lot. What we seek is lots, either old urban renewal sites or brownfield sites or underutilized parking lots. This parking lot that we're on now is part of the urban renewal plan. They demolished quite a few buildings and put up a large parking lot that was underutilized. The vision, the urban renewal vision for that area did not come to fruition. So people are now revisiting that and say, can we hit the reset button? So Crano Square is in Poughkeepsie. It's also in the middle income program. It has workforce housing and some artist lofts. It's a mix, a third. And we feel it's a very attractive mix. In addition, that's in the Brownfield program, New York State Brownfield program. So we got a call about 3 years ago. We got a call from the city of Oneonta and said, hey, we're a DRI community, and we've been looking for a vibrant project for our downtown. Would you come up? We said, sure. So Sean and I took a ride up there. We felt that the city lent itself very well to our program. And the mayor then put the whole common council and the planning board and a few other community members on a bus down to Peekskill to visit our site. And we're happy to report that we're under construction now in Oneonta. We were also introduced to the mayor and Matt Andrews up in Rome. They have a site directly across from City Hall. They've been trying to get an artist district going in that part of their downtown, similar to very close to City Hall. And we answered an RFP. We were awarded the site. We were awarded funding a couple months ago, and we're hoping to close sometime next month. What's interesting about both Rome, Oneonta, and Peekskill, we don't have one on-site parking spot. Think about that. We don't have one on-site parking spot. In each place, we are utilizing, we underutilized parking garages that were built as part of urban renewal, and they have been lack of interest in parking there. We have contributed money to increase the signage and the lighting, and when our tenants are parking there, it's creating pedestrian traffic. It's helping to eliminate any stigma that may exist, and it's creating a synergy because now all of our tenants are walking 2 or 3 blocks from a garage. You're seeing foot traffic. If you go to these areas, you're going to see increased foot traffic, and that's what's needed when you're working in a part of a community looking to revitalize their downtown. You need more foot traffic, and with the foot traffic comes the other entrepreneurs, comes the restaurants and the breweries and the coffee shops and so forth. So that's an interesting part of our model. We will look for areas that we can build with little or no parking at all. It's worked very well in Peekskill. Only half of our tenants actually have cars. And I think this is consistent with what Paul mentioned earlier as far as reducing our carbon footprint. Listen, the attraction back to the urban centers was accelerating prior to COVID. I think it's slowed down a little bit, but I expect it to ramp up again once finally we get on the other side of this next year. But there is a attraction, if you will, to live in the urban centers. So we have also gone up to Lockport, New York. Although we normally develop on vacant lots, we were called up to Lockport. They have a historic building where they built the radiators for General Motors. And we saw this building and fell in love with it. It has an atrium right down the middle of the building. And we're going to build a brewery with an indoor park on the ground floor, utilizing the light to come down from the atrium. It's pretty exciting. We're hoping to break ground on that either the end of this year or early next year. So we look for communities where we can have a tremendous impact. Another community that we're working in now, and we hope to break ground next year, is Gloversville. Our project, Love City Lofts, is going to be the anchor of their DRI project. It was another underutilized site. It linked City Hall and the park and the waterfront with Main Street. And we feel if we can create what we've done at Peekskill and Poughkeepsie there, we can get traffic coming down. Gloversville has tremendous bones, beautiful, beautiful historic buildings on Main Street, and we're very excited about working there as well. Some of the challenges, I think putting all of the different funding sources together, the timing of the brownfield, DEC brownfield unit is tremendous. They work with you. They'll get on the phone with Homes and Community Renewal and say, listen, they have a little more work to do, but they're going to get there. And that endorsement sometimes gets you over the hurdle to get funded for a project. But the timing of pulling all these things together, as Paul mentioned, the historic tax credit program, we're utilizing that up in Lockport. That was a process as well, and there's some time attached to that. You talk about building departments or so forth. my only story about a building department, the first 2 times I walked into the building department and told them what I was doing, they stopped and looked at me and said, "You want to do what? Where?" And so it was, once I got over that, all the other nuances of where the pipes were going and what size our insulation was all kind of fell into place. But, the impact, personally, I'm having fun again. I started with Downtown Revitalization. We went more for the traditional affordable housing, built a lot of senior housing and workforce housing, but the downtown projects I truly love. I spend my weekends driving around to our various projects. We went back to Beacon. We built 100 units in Beacon, 73 mixed income, affordable, and we built a market rate building in the back where we've actually kept an apartment. I was up there yesterday. So I love walking around Beacon, reminiscent from 30 years ago. But the impact that these projects can have, especially in DRI communities, Peekskill was not a DRI. Our presence there helped their DRI presentation, helped get them that award. Rome and Oneonta were both DRI projects, DRI priority projects. So is Lockport. It's a DRI priority project. And we are the centerpiece of their downtown plan. And it will have a tremendous impact and be the anchor, be the final leg of their DRI plan. And we're hoping for the same, as I mentioned, in Gloversville. So I think that the impact for these projects has just been tremendous. And back to other challenges, I will say this: it was a steep learning curve for Sean and I, both on the construction side, because we went from building typical suburban 2- and 3-story wood frame buildings to some of the downtown models. We had to use steel and concrete. We had everything was different, rooftop terraces. And there was a very steep learning curve. I didn't think at this point in my life I could learn anything new, but I had to. And in addition, the artist housing. The artist housing is, you have to thread a lot of needles. You have to stay within the guidelines of a city like Peekskill that has their own artist certification committee, and yet you have to balance that with any fair housing concerns. And we've been able to do that and produce very diverse tenant mix. But those are some of the challenges. And then I think now a lot of the challenges have dissipated because we've successfully completed 4 of these. And after you complete 4, a lot of the questions, where a municipal leader will question you and say, are you sure you can do this? Are you sure you'll have the impact that you're representing? And now we just, like I mentioned earlier, we just put people, on the bus and we bring them down. So it's been a lot of fun. The DRI program is a innovative, brilliant idea that's working in so many communities, but especially upstate New York. Because picture upstate New York, you have communities on Main Street where you have these vacant lots, or you have a vacant building, and it's not ready. The market's not there for a true market rate project. It's not. Either the market's not there, or the rents aren't high enough to make it work. You need something creative, and some of the municipal leaders are looking for something new, something vibrant, and I think we filled that niche, and we're very, 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 very thrilled to be doing so. So I thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken, for providing that. I think urban renewal visions not coming to fruition is something that is prevalent across so many communities in upstate New York, and so the way that you've described these projects, I want to go and visit each one of them. So thank you. It sounds like the economic vitality of those downtowns have really improved because of that. I'm now going to introduce our final speaker, Kevin O'Connor. Kevin is CEO of RUPCO Development. As an executive in housing and community development, Mr. O'Connor enjoys 30 years of experience in the not-for-profit sector. Prior to joining RUPCO in November 2002, Mr. O'Connor had previously developed over 150 units of affordable housing with combined development budgets exceeding $14 million, including homeless housing, home ownership, and rental housing. Kevin, I look forward to hearing about your projects.
Well, thank you, Lori, and great to join the panel today. So I was smart enough to partner with Ken when I was at Hudson River Housing in the mid-90s to do my first tax credit deal with him, and also smart enough to see when Paul became our first smart growth director. Paul came and spoke at our community breakfast in the fall of 2007 to the stakeholders here in Kingston and Ulster County about the future of smart growth. So I'd like to share my screen today and talk a little bit about Energy Square. And can you guys see that? Yes, great. So, following up to a historic restoration that we did here in Kingston of the old Lace Mill, which we created some artist housing. The Center for Creative Education and the local nonprofit came to us and said they were looking for new space. And we looked around, we found an empty bowling alley right in Midtown that we were able to take down and build Energy Square. 57 units of housing on top of about 10,000 square foot of commercial space, and find and create the new home for the Center for Creative Education, a tremendous nonprofit providing dance and music for children and people of all ages. And the urban footprint is a great place for all of the reasons that people have talked about. Presents a little bit of challenge sometimes. I'm seeing some, now I'm seeing sprawling solar being put up on greenfields, but in the urban environment, we use carports and our roof to put up our solar. To achieve net zero for living, which we did, this is Energy Square is LEED Platinum, our first LEED Platinum, and it has achieved net zero for living. We're super proud of it. LEED International named it one of 3 affordable housing projects nationwide. The first thing is to get the building envelope right, and the thermal enclosure to really we've been doing a few different projects and using solar and geothermal, and we have a tremendous energy consultant, Pasquale Strocchia, who we've worked with now on a number of projects. And Pasquale told me 10, 12 years ago, he said, the geothermal and the solar are great, they're sort of sexy, but you got to start getting your building envelope correct. You got to take care of the air leaks and keep the water out. And in Germany, they're doing that, and they're heating buildings with the equivalent of a hairdryer because they get their building envelope right first. The second thing is to bring in high efficiency mechanical systems, geothermal, and other high efficiency to create the HVAC system. And thirdly, it's to bring on the on-site renewable and the solar. Things that we did for the envelope, under slab installation, roof decks with 7 inches, continuous air barriers between the living spaces, and compartmentalizing to really tighten up all of the air sealant. I think we dug about 20 wells at Energy Square, 200 feet, and we do have a gas boiler just for the hot water, and of course we have the energy recovery ventilation system. So we have to, when you tighten up the envelope, you really have to make sure you're bringing in the fresh air, but we also want to treat the air so that in the middle of winter we're not just dumping 10-degree air into the building. So our recovery ventilation system really tries to introduce fresh air, but also to treat the air and to recover energy from it as we're exchanging it through the year. Again, our outside deck. Again, as Paul, I think, really did a good job opening up. The idea of a mixed use, mixed income. We have 7 units for homeless young people, and we have some near market rate units and some affordable units in between, a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, right in downtown, along with some right next to our Performing Arts Center, in the Midtown Arts District. There's big investments coming from the city of Kingston on redoing Broadway and making complete streets, adding bike lanes. And so this is a great location, and it really fulfills our region's theme, which has been live, work, and play. And so right here in the middle of Midtown Kingston sits Energy Square. We have wired the entire parking lot for charging stations, and we have 4 charging stations right now for vehicles, but we think the future is coming quickly. And within about 10 years or so, we think we're going to need a lot more charging stations in the parking lot. So this was a near passive house design. Total development cost about $21 million. We can't do our work without Homes and Community Renewal, really our most important partner. But here, NYSERDA played a big role, and we probably brought through solar tax credits, NYSERDA grants and incentives, about $1.5 million to help offset some of the energy costs. And we have, in fact, achieved net zero for living. So let's see if I can stop sharing. So yeah, so that's the project. Some of the challenges, it's it's nearby our CSX rail line. We had to make sure that we could demonstrate that locating at this location could be safe, and we think we did a good job with that. Some of the learning curve, working with our local utility and working with some of the technology. David, you said you were going to do something with demonstrating some of the energy savings. So I'd like to talk to you about some of that, because we have some of the technology we've added. We have master metered the building, and so people are paying rent, and all of their energy use, heating, cooling, lighting, cooking, it's all in their rent payment. And we do have a system through Levitron to really monitor. We can monitor what any outlet is using in terms of energy, and so to provide that kind of energy feedback to people, I think we want to do a more robust job of doing that, but we still have some learning to do. I think the impact on the neighborhood, again, Kingston has, following up to our Lace Mill Artist Housing, created the Midtown Arts District. We have landed 2 great art nonprofits on the first floor of Energy Square. So in addition to the Center for Creative Education, we have DRAW, which is MAD's local art teaching program for people of all ages. So the 2 art nonprofits are on our first floor, and along with the other investment to be on the New York's rail trail system running from the city up to Montreal, and right in the hub of Midtown Kingston. It's really, I think, making a big effect. And it offers a different tenure of housing. The city of Kingston is predominantly 1 to 4 family housing stock, and this offers a little bit of a different style of housing that I think people are seeking as well. So Lord knows we need more housing on all levels. So we're very proud of Energy Square, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Kevin. I love hearing about this project because it not only addresses the carbon from transportation by developing downtown, and being close to transportation options. It also addresses operational carbon by reducing the amount of energy that it takes to live in this building. And then on top of all of that, you're also taking advantage of lower embodied carbon due to utilizing another a building that's already there. So the lowest embodied carbon that you can use is one that's already been built. So it's very exciting. And so, Joe, do we have time for a question?
Absolutely, we're going to make time because there's
Okay,
just such
great.
robust conversation here. I want everybody that's attending to enjoy the continued conversation.
Excellent. So I'm going to start with a question for Kevin, if you don't mind. You wonderfully shared that your costs, or the not costs, but the different resources that you were able to utilize in your project. And so for a project that is not only downtown, but is also high performance, carbon neutral, where does one begin when it comes to understanding what support is available, what resources are available to go into a project?
You start with assembling a team of experts. So, we have had the good fortune to work with Dutton Architects, Dutton Associates here in Kingston on a few projects. We have done a series of some projects. So we've done some learning. We've done geothermal a few times and solar. We had the largest solar array on the Lace Mill and now, but integral building design, Pascal Strokia as an energy consultant, and then working with the consultants at NYSERDA early on. I think my career has been to work collaboratively with others and to seek out people like Paul Beyer early, and to seek out the consultants at NYSERDA and to put together a team of experts, to work with HCR early on the funding for some of this. We had some challenges, as I mentioned, around siting this building. But that's how I know how to do it, is to reach out and assemble the folks who really know what they're doing in the various fields, and particularly as we've moved into new, these are all newer technologies that we've been advancing over the last decade and a half, and a lot of learning still to come, but that's our approach.
Great, thank you. So for Ken, many of your development projects have over the years have also focused on veterans and seniors and disabled folks. So how have these inclusive developments contributed to the economic vitality of your downtowns?
The veterans housing project we did was in an area of Poughkeepsie that was it was a industrial site away from the downtown. I think it helped bring traffic and vitality to that section. Everybody looked at that area as a light industrial section, maybe not conducive to residential, but that changed because then there was another phase, and then another developer came in and built another phase. What we did here in Baldwin Place, this is where we're located in Somers, it was very interesting. This was part of the Westchester County housing settlement. Somers was under an agreement, if you will, to produce so many units of affordable housing. But the town of Somers was very pragmatic, and they said, listen, we'll let you build, but we want to see a commercial component. And I said, well, I don't do commercial. And they said, well, we don't do rezones. So we reached an understanding very early on. It was very clear. And so we were able to not only build this commercial building here, which we also extended sewer lines up and down Route 6 for the other property owners. We extended sewer lines across the street. And we also widened Route 6 and put in a pedestrian crosswalk. So now what's happened is a few of our neighbors, their businesses have picked up dramatically. And this hamlet called Baldwin Place in Somers is now quite vibrant. And you have people crossing Route 6 with the pedestrian crosswalks where you didn't have that before. And most of the housing we built here was senior housing. So Somers itself wasn't a downtown, but it was a hamlet, and it needed something, and we provided it. So we have a upscale cafe that's very, very busy, Bobo's Cafe. We have Green's Natural Market, and between the two of them, it's a very busy building here. And so I think that's an example of how you can utilize other forms of affordable housing and use some of the funds to entice or appease the municipality to let you build more.
Excellent. Thank you for that. David, you mentioned how you're starting to work with other projects and how you're able to bring other projects into this high performance historic preservation group. Can you describe any spin-off projects that are either within Hudson, that are saying, I want to be part of this DRI transformation as well, or that may be in other communities?
Yeah, so thanks. So most people approach me through my arts connections and backgrounds as being somebody who consults on the renovation of art spaces. So I'm not sure, a lot of what I've been doing is let's kick out the old lighting fixtures for LEDs in a theater where you have like 800 lights on at a time. And that kind of client was who I'd been working with. But yeah, now there's another project. I started doing a little bit of work with Kite's Nest in Hudson, which is a part of the DRI, and they are advocacy for youth empowerment and agriculture right in the city of Hudson. So they have a little 2-acre farm, a teaching farm, and youth empowerment program that's super awesome. There's another kind of large landowner that Lori and I started talking about in the Mid-Hudson Valley that's a land preservation that's interested in evaluating their entire property for to bring it to net zero performance, but also combined with land stewardship goals that are really forward thinking in terms of how people engage and interact with their 9,000 acres. And just generally in some other arts organizations, there's another project at Art Oh My. Their goals were around accessibility and improvement of the space for artists' use. But for a small added, relatively small when you're looking at the total budget size, some small improvements or added investment were able to achieve some energy standard improvements as well. So, it's really about, looking at a project where that wasn't part of the goals necessarily and say, hey, for a little bit more, we could do some other things too. And I find that people actually believe that these are good choices, but they feel a little bit out of range in some cases for folks who aren't, haven't spent time building buildings or even building tiny houses, so.
That is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, Paul, 20 new DRIs. That is really exciting. How can developers or not-for-profits in downtowns position themselves to help strengthen these DRI proposals so that those communities have something that's really vibrant to propose to the program?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I remember drafting up the first DRI application and wondering about those very questions. What are we looking for? What are we going to get? What are we hoping for? And so let me start with this whole idea that has been discussed by our panel members of holism. Don't give us a bunch of separate isolated projects because they're pet projects. Show us how they not only catalyze and synergize one another, but how they synergize further investment. The DRI is not a money drop. It is intended to leverage investments beyond the $10 million, because $10 million is not going to fix any downtown. It's going to catalyze investment. In fact, I did a case study on Oswego DRI that I worked in very closely called Project Synergies in a DRI. And I could circulate those to the attendees. And they had a grand strategy, and all of the projects fit into it. Bring people to the downtown, allow them to walk around, and get them to the waterfront, get them to utilize this tremendous natural resource. So synergies, holism, there are two ways to look at it. Ken mentioned that his project in Peekskill helped get a DRI. So we're looking for readiness. Have you invested already and taken some chances on innovative projects? So that's one way to go about it. We are ready. We've already shown that we can do projects basically that are innovative and contribute to downtown revitalization. The other side of that, we've seen in many DRIs have demonstrated capacity by showing that they've engaged in extensive community-based planning and outreach. So many of our DRIs have used planning programs, particularly through the Department of State and NYSERDA and DEC. So they have a vision in place. They've done the analyses. They've done the housing analyses. They've done brownfield opportunity area plans, which we do at DOS, or local waterfront revitalization plans, or sustainability plans from NYSERDA and DEC. And they're good plans. And so they're saying to us, we have buy-in here. We just need money to get over the hump. Those are, I think, three different ways to approach your DRI application.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, David. Thank you, Ken and Kevin. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm so happy to have been a part of it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Joe?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Lori. I just wanted to run through what I call my baker's dozen of major takeaways, and I'll run through them in a very quick way. Downtown revitalization is a net positive for the climate. Carbon benefits for investing in urban centers, as evidenced by the DRI as a core program for New York State. Transit-oriented development is key, and gold and platinum standards are critical. Adaptive reuse is also a key strategy to reduce carbon footprints. Reduction of drive time, car trips, and increasing pedestrian traffic is important. Critical mass of buildings is critical for carbon reduction. Connections with the downtown is vital to the community, accomplished without parking on site, increases foot traffic and synergies with local businesses. Combining residential and commercial uses increases foot traffic, energy, and synergy. Underutilized buildings, parking lots, and vacant land into productive uses provides new life for a community. Diverse tenant mix is vital to the overall health of the community and the residents. Tight building envelope, high efficiency HVAC and on-site renewable energy, geothermal, solar, all important pieces. Arts and community development is a winning combination. And lastly, something we call lasagna financing is critical. Leverage all financial resources and local incentives and catalyze other investments. So there you have it, the top 13. I want to thank all of the panelists and our moderator for today's session. And in closing, once again, a big thank you to CPC for joining us for this series. Our next series and final session will be September 23rd, discussing financing of high performance multifamily buildings. And a special thank you to all involved with this presentation. I'd also like to thank our investors in the Center for Housing Solutions, which includes Howard Hanna Rand Realty, the Kearney Group, CPC, RUPCO, Hudson River Housing, Leviticus Fund and TD Bank, Kirchhoff and Baxter Development, and of course, NeighborWorks America. Thanks again. Have a wonderful day. Stay out of the heat